Welcome everyone to Comics from the Multiverse, episode 460. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Matt.
Hey, what is cracking?
This is a DC Comics podcast. We get together and we talk about the books that we read this week. Coming up on this week's show, we've got Absolute Superman issue 8, Absolute Green Lantern issue 3, Batgirl 8, Birds of Prey 22, JSA issue 8, Resurrection Man Quantum Karma issue 3, and Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong 2, issue 1. That's what's coming up on today's show. So hopefully...
That's a hell of a title. That rivals the Long Halloween last Halloween.
Yeah, honestly, I get that it is a sequel, but I think a subtitle would have been better just because having the number 2 and then an issue number sounds really clunky. But
yes,
hey, whatever. We're here for it. So yes, welcome to the show, everyone. We'll get into all the usual shenanigans. But first, Matt, how was your week?
It was very long. I had an anxiety attack midway through the week. Still don't know why. Might have been tied to the earthquake we had here in Vegas that day. But yeah, it's hot and it's getting hotter. But we also got thunderstorms through, which is really early for Vegas summer. Usually those don't start popping through till the end of June. But yeah, it's man, I'm so glad my air conditioning's new. We got a new one back in September. Cause coming in from that, 98 degrees in the morning and then pop it into the nicely air conditioned house feels so good.
I don't know that pleasure, but I do not have the temperatures that you do. In fact, it's been kind of mildly just kind of cools into warm here this past week, so not too bad on that front. And we're still recording episodes of Collector's Cut for Superman season, and we did Superman 3 this week. That movie is like just full of things. It's just there's so much in it. It ended up in like a 2-hour and 40-minute discussion just because there's so much to talk about. It's dense with silly ideas, to say the least. So, yeah, that was the thing this week.
Dang.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I actually did try. I started the first like 20 minutes of Shin Kamen Rider because I thought,
okay,
I'm in the mood for something a little different. And it's kind of like, oh, this is like the modern Japanese reboot of Kamen Rider, which I never saw Kamen Rider, technically, but I did watch Masked Rider, which was like the Americanized version of it.
Masked Rider, and there it is. So wait, so what does Shin mean? Does that like mean new in Japan?
I don't know, but there's a Shin Godzilla was first, and then there's a Shin, I think, Ultraman, and then Shin Kamen Rider. There's like 3 Shin movies.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because I just saw, that's why I asked, because I pulled up Shin Kamen. I'm like, I know Kamen Rider. Why? And it's like, oh, there's a Japanese Masked Rider. That's where they got the inspiration from.
Now, I do intend on finishing it. I will say, though, that it hits the ground running in such a way that it does feel a little, like, hyperactive and, like I'm not so sure it's good. I'm just going to say that. I'm not so sure it's good. It might be feeling a little bit too into, even though it's darker, because like I was all excited at first because he punches people and they just explode into blood, and I'm like, oh, this is like violent. I'm into this. But the way it delivers exposition and the way it sort of does the action feels a little, I don't know. It's maybe a little too into the like. I mean, it's live action, but it maybe feels a bit too anime for my tastes in terms of how it's like presenting itself.
Live action. Yeah, so Shin can be translated into new, true, or God in Japanese. So it's all about the context. So like this could be like new Kamen Rider, but with Godzilla, it might be true Godzilla, right? So I guess it just depends on the context.
Technically, it could be God Godzilla, but I doubt that's what they were going for, though. Because it sounds silly.
So,
yeah, I can see.
Have we talked about what the word Gojira means in Japanese?
I don't know if I've talked about that. Go on, you go, Matt.
Yeah, so it's a smash up of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale. So technically, Godzilla is the gorilla whale, and that's how we get Gojira.
That's funny because he reminds me of neither of those things.
But I guess as you're trying to describe him in in the way that the Japanese describe things, it makes sense to them. So, but yeah. Also, I don't want to say the Japanese word for the gorilla because it sounds like you're being racist. And many of the English to Japanese words, it ain't a good look for a white guy to be yelling that.
Okay, I'm curious now, so I'm gonna Japanese word for gorilla.
It's exactly what you think it's gonna sound like, Pete. Yes, it's right in the silence.
I'm not sure why you think that sounds problematic. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, it just sounds like you're doing an accent you don't need to be doing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be similar to a slur, but no,
no, not to a slur. No, it's doing the voice, and it's one of those things with Japanese when they adopt an American word, But yeah.
Yes. Okay, I see what you're saying. It sounds like you're doing a bad accent if you try to say it.
Yeah, I don't want to pull a Michael Scott here, where there's none there, but
Okay.
The stuff on the internet lives forever. So
don't worry, I've got some incriminating clips of you. Don't worry.
Yeah. Still one of my all-time favorites, and I did it to myself, was when I took the picture with the X-Men Apocalypse stand-up.
Yeah.
next to Jean Grey, and you just made it like a flyer that said, "Have you seen this man?" And it gives me a chuckle every now and then when I need one. So.
Yes, barely legal Jean Grey at the time, might I add.
Yeah, yes, which you think you can send a funny picture to your friend, and it gets misused and made to look more salacious than it is. But yes, the "Have you seen this man" still kills me.
Dear. I don't know if I have that somewhere still. It's on an old computer, so it may just be lost to the annals of time. But
good. I can breathe again.
Maybe one day I'll find it. I'll go hunting for old memes and see if I can uncover it somewhere.
Yeah.
Make you look like a pervert once more.
See, at my age now, I would never do such a thing. But 15 years ago, well, not even 15.
Yeah, it wasn't 15 years ago. When did that come out? Like 2017, something like that.
I was no Apocalypse. We were well established by then. We started recording together in 2013. So, Apocalypse was 2016, 2017, around that time. It was still new. So, I remember you made it the backdrop one time. One of the old shows.
That's right.
That was fun.
Anyway, let's get into things. We'll start off with the list formerly known as the ComiXology Top 10, the Kindle ranking. We'll see how things are shaping up there at the time of recording. Matt, you got a guess for number one?
So it's a bit dodgy this week because I see that there's a new number one from Marvel called Imperial. Now, it's also a $7 book, so I don't know if that's gonna sell as hot digitally as something that's already established. Oh, I'm gonna take my old tried and true. I'm gonna guess an Absolute book, and I'm gonna guess Absolute Superman.
That would be incorrect, Matt.
Oh, it is. Is it Imperial?
It is Imperial.
$7 book selling like that online. Wow.
It's Jonathan Hickman, right? He's got enough of a following. It's Marvel's next big event, building up to whatever Hickman's doing next. They've kind of given Hickman the keys to the big events and all that stuff again. Yeah. So that's where that's going. Number 2 is Absolute Superman. Number 3 is Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion. Number 4 is Absolute Green Lantern. Number 5 is Ultimate Wolverine. Number 6 is X-Men. Number 7 is Marvel Knights, The World to Come. Number 8 is Amazing Spider-Man. Number 9 is JSA. And number 10 is Storm. So
wow.
It's definitely she's a bit more Marvel once you get into the rest of the top 10. But there's a few DC books on there. The Absolute book's still at the top of the DC list. Looking further down to see what else is there. 12 is the Godzilla Kong book. 13 is the DC Pride special. 14 is the Atom Project book. For Birds of Prey, we're down to 16. Secret Six is at 20. Where's Batgirl? Oh, 21. I had a hard time spotting it with my eye there.
Where's Ivy at?
I have to click load more, I think.
Gotcha. Oh, that's unfortunate.
On, they count on 10, 20, 30, 32.
Hey.
Yeah. That's not actually that surprising, though. Ivy's not been doing terribly well
No. It's free falling, though, the last couple times. You know?
Yeah. So, yeah, I wish Birds of Prey and Batgirl were up a bit higher. I think they deserve a bit more love, especially over, some of these other things that are up there. But hey,
yeah.
Other than that, I suppose I can't complain too much. Hopefully they're at a sustainable level at the very least. And who knows, maybe like Poison Ivy, enough perverts are buying the sexy variants to keep it churning along.
Mm-hmm. There's not that many. Well, I'm looking at the variants right now for Ivy, and there's not that many this time around. So, there's some good covers too, but they're not what we've come to expect with Harley and Ivy and Catwoman and that type of stuff.
Okay. All right, we'll get into the books then. Absolute Superman issue 8, Jason Aaron writing with Rafa Sandoval on the art. We kind of kick off a new arc here.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't here for the last issue.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was a tough read with all the Brainiac stuff. It might have been also because I was in vacation mode, trying to read it on vacation. Yeah.
So you would disagree with the assessment that it was the best issue of the book so far?
Yes.
Yeah, both me and Connor said that.
They said it was the best so far?
Yep.
Poof, man. I don't know about that.
Nope. Brainiac's backstory and like what he's up to, all nice and creepy, techno horror. It was great.
Yeah.
It was oozing vibes.
Gotcha. But again, still it's not bad. I just thought it was tough to read with some of the jumping around and whatnot with things. So the fact that we get back to Clark here in the Lazarus shenanigans, I was very welcome. That said, tough to read still doesn't mean bad. I still, there are things in there that I liked. So here though, the fact that we rebounded back to the stuff I'm already enjoying is good.
I mean, this was a good issue. I did like last issue more though. I think last issue was so focused and really built up Brainiac for what he is. This issue, on the other hand, obviously evolves a little bit the Ra's al Ghul stuff. We get to see him kind of like running Lazarus Corporation, and he's on a shareholder meeting call while he's killing assassins from the Omega Men that are trying to kill him. And not only that, he throws one of them in the Lazarus pit that he's got up in the building. And then this pit specifically reborns the guy, but as a baby, like as a toddler. And he just takes him over to the balcony and drops this baby to its death.
Cool. The fact that he doesn't stop the share, he's still having the shareholder meeting. He's not like, oh, 1 second, I have to deal with something. He is still doing his entire spiel about running Lazarus and why it's called Lazarus and what his family has done, why he's the demon's head, as he's fighting these Omega Men assassins. And then when he throws the guy into the Lazarus pit and says maximum strength, and it turns him into a baby, and you just think, oh, okay, that's cool. He's talking about how he's never had a son, and then he takes this guy that was just an adult. Like, do you think he's reformed to baby mind, or do you think this guy knows exactly what's going on? Like, he has the mental capacity in the baby body.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's darker and funnier if he is just a baby now. Like, if he doesn't understand. Because if it's if it's still the fully grown man's head in there who's like comprehending that this assassination attempt has failed and he's been thrown to his death, that's one thing. The fact that he's in a child's body is neither here nor there at a certain point. But the idea that this baby just doesn't know what's happening and is dropped off the ledge to its death
He just
lovely.
takes him and goes, yep, you're gone. And then we see that the Lazarus building is over, like, it towers over the Daily Planet.
Yeah, it's in Metropolis.
Which, again, just a reminder of Metropolis.
Yeah, it's kind of a reveal at the end of the scene that this is in Metropolis, because we've not really seen much of Metropolis yet in the book.
No.
So this was kind of a coming out party for it.
And it talks about, 200 years ago, they took this from being like a little railroad town to being the most advanced city on Earth and stuff. And, I do like the using of Ra's al Ghul as a Superman villain for right now. Like, I think it's a very inspired choice. So to see him up to this, you know, and him even teasing he doesn't have sons, right? So the daughters are somewhere. So we got Talia, we got Nissa, maybe. You know,
well,
I like to see how they interact.
I mean, I don't think that was the point of him saying that, though. I think him saying that he has no son to, like, you know, continue this through is setting up that in this universe, he's going to want Clark to be his adoptive son. Like, in the same way that in the main universe, he wanted Batman to continue
Bruce,
on the
detective.
Yeah. Also, at one point, he called the shareholders the League of Shareholders, which did give me a chuckle. I'm not going to lie.
It did. No, it did.
So, yeah, that was the Raz stuff. That was interesting. And then back in Smallville, Superman goes to Martha, but Martha's got dementia, doesn't know who he is, freaks out. It's kind of a sad scene. But the big thing here, though, is when he goes back out into the streets of the town, Lois comes up to speak to him, as does the leader of the Omega Men, who we already know is Jimmy as well, which does make this very interesting of a scene where they're both trying to argue Superman to, like, trust them and go on their side and, like, come with them. And they don't like each other very much. I think what's interesting about this to me, though, is that when, you know, like, out of nowhere, Superman's shot in the chest with a kryptonite bullet, and it's, you know, it's Christopher Smith, it's the Peacemakers, all that stuff's going on. I think what I really liked about this is this idea that this puts him in a vulnerable position, and immediately Lois and Jimmy have to, like, maybe work together to help him. Now, they kind of, like, pivot away from it by the end of the issue because Lois gets left behind because they don't want her to come in, because they think she'll lead, you know, the Lazarus Corps to them in their hideouts and whatnot, so they don't let her come through the boom tube. But this idea that Lois and Jimmy, like, first start to work together to, like, help Superman is kind of a nice poignant way of, like, starting that relationship off in some way. So, you know, I dug that. I still like the idea as well that Superman came to Smallville to try and, like, find his conscience because he wants to kill Christopher Smith and he knows that he shouldn't. So he's, like, looking for that moral center, you know, Martha or whoever to guide him. And he's not really found it, is the sad thing, is that he's still kind of ready to do it. And it's only because he's actually mortally injured here that he's kind of having to, like, hold back, not even hold back, but just he's not got the strength or the means to properly win right now.
Well, and the fact that he wants to kill him because he killed the innocent people in Pakistan, right? And
well, yeah,
so
obviously that's why he wants to kill him. That's what I meant the whole time.
Well, right, but the fact that he's thinking about the two people that found him still, and he wants that guidance, or, you know, even though he can't get it, just him showing up and talking about going to Svalbard Island where there's more polar bears than people, and it was just this isolation, you know, and he, you know, that wasn't enough to clear his head because he wanted to look up at the stars, and, you know, it reminded him of looking up at the stars when he was in Smallville, and just that whole thing. And like you said, it's his Smallville's kind of his conscience. It's where he's going to reset. So,
yeah.
Well, yeah. And also
specifically Martha and Jonathan, I think are his conscience rather than the town per se. But, like,
yeah. But also the fact that the town's been taken over by Lazarus, right? And, like, it's not even the town that he was at for a little bit at this point. They've just bought everything up, and everybody now is, you know, subservient to Lazarus Corp in the kind of the same way that the Kryptonians were, you know, his parents were in that system too, right? So it's the fact that it's this town that was his first, you know, experience on Earth. It isn't what he remembers. It's even changed since the short time he's been here. So I liked all that stuff too.
Is that a complete change though? Because I kind of got the impression Lazarus were sort of buying all that up, like, you know, over time.
I think it was over time, but even now, like they mentioned here, I think Jimmy says it, that nothing in Smallville is owned by the people anymore. Everything is Lazarus, and you work on their farms. You know, you do stuff for them. It's all part of that system. Yeah,
because I got the impression though that when they came after the Kents and they were sort of spying on them, it was part of it was that they were like, hey, this is the last farmers who won't sell us their land kind of thing. So I kind of got the impression that most of the town had already been like owned by Lazarus by that point. So I didn't think that was like a new thing per se. Because for a start, I don't even think it's technically that long ago. The timeline of things. He's not actually been on Earth that long, all things considered. So yeah, I mean, obviously he fights Christopher Smith a little bit. You know, Saul's trying to, like, you know, deal with the bullet and, like, get it out and all the rest of it. But ultimately, we get a couple of big action beats here. Saul kind of armors Superman up, so we get this kind of very metal armored look to him. That looks very Demon Souls-esque with a Superman logo on the chest.
Yeah.
So that's something.
I also like though that Soul calls it tornado mode, and knowing about tornadoes in the Midwest and whatnot. I thought that was a fun little touch by Aaron here. Yeah. And it's just like his super armor mode, and he says that he hit Smith like however many times in that 1 second, and he's still standing. It definitely builds up Smith as a formidable opponent.
It was 1,000 times in 30 seconds for the record.
There you go.
But Smith, he's got his gun with the kryptonite bullets. He fires it a numerous amount of times at him. And Saul at this point has figured out that these bullets are like irradiated parts of Krypton. Like, so this is them sort of discovering that kryptonite's a weakness and all the rest of it. But ultimately the reason why this all kind of de-escalates is because Smith's about to kill him, and Brainiac does not want Superman dead. So Brainiac actually shocks Smith and takes over the suit and like zaps him. And this gives Jimmy and Lois a chance to like get Superman up and get him through the boom tube. But Lois is left behind, and that's kind of the cliffhanger. So Jimmy and the Omega Men have got injured Superman, and they're going to maybe try and help him. And Lois has been left behind, and will now be seen as a traitor because she was actively helping Superman and try to like get Smith to stand down. So it leaves both plot lines in an interesting place for next issue, for sure. So, and obviously Sandoval's art, I think, is pretty solid here again. Obviously, it's nice to have him back. So no complaints.
Yeah, I like you're talking about when Christopher Smith unloads the bullets on Clark, and we get the panels in the form of Blam, right? So he's playing with a little bit of the breakdowns there by putting them into the wording. You get the gun in there shooting the green. There's like green smoke coming off of it. So that looks cool. And then when Clark, even when he's just standing in Smallville and it's quiet, right? Like he's walking through the town, and like the shadows that are hitting on him, it does give him kind of a Batman vibe, which I'm appreciating. Weirdly.
Yeah, I like the fact that the green of the bullets and stuff and the smoke coming from his wound really contrast, because there's no other green like anywhere on those pages. It's just the kryptonite. So that, especially once it gets to the point where there's lots of red because of all the Saul like power like tornado stuff. Once you get to that, so those green bursts of light do really stick out. Coloring's obviously great. I think the opening with Ra's al Ghul, of course, is very different to the rest of it. In the sense that it's doing something very different. It's a lot more hand-to-hand combat. It's him fighting with blades. I won't say it's not fantastical, because it still kind of is because of the skill level of the Ra's al Ghul, but it's very different to all these superpowers, like, igniting and all these big effects happening around them. This is a lot more, swooshing a blade, stabbing, or in the case of the ending, dropping toddlers off of balconies. Which, gold.
Also, Ra's seems gigantic here, too. Like, the way that he's holding up those Omega Men agents, right? He seems massive. So that's also a thing, too, that he's moving so effortlessly despite having this massive size. It makes him seem almost monstrous.
Yeah, they've given him a little bit of a kingpin kind of stature here in this version.
A little bit, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, because like the way that he's wielding that sword that he pulls off the wall, right? And it looks like this gigantic sword, and he's just still, the way that the action lines are going, with the nice curves and whatever. But yeah, he just has a presence here that normally I feel like Ra's doesn't have. That we assume we associate him with being like a ninja, not a big gigantic dude.
We associate him with being a bit more calm, I guess. Whereas this feels like a slightly angrier version of Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah.
So all right.
But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, what are you giving Absolute Superman?
I'm at 8.5.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I agree with 8.5. Absolute Green Lantern, issue 3, Al Ewing writing with Jahnoy, Lindsay on the art. I think, I really liked the first issue of this, and I think it was intriguing. I think issue 2 continued that. I think this is, again, the best issue of this book. I think it's been getting better with each issue.
I like this one so much. And the dawning of Jon Stewart's plan, I feel so dumb that it took me that long to realize why the things are able to penetrate.
Yeah,
right?
I kind of pieced it together last issue, actually. Because there was hints in the last issue.
Okay.
And I didn't know for sure, obviously, but this kind of like went down the path that I thought. But the detail that I didn't quite predict was that it didn't have to actually be gold. Like, just even coating it in the color gold would be enough to have some effect. Now, it does seem like actual gold, like, pure gold will have more of an effect, but if you just paint something else the color gold, it'll still have an effect. So this is kind of going back to the whole idea of yellow being the weakness. It's like a take on that kind of thing.
When he takes the Blue Devil, which I also love seeing Blue Devil, right? And he's like an actual movie character in universe, and that Hal had this collectible of this. Essentially, it's a Funko Pop, right? They call it something else. Can't remember the name. That's close, but it's like the gold edition, and it's plated with this gold paint. And he just throws it through the dome, and it cuts through. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, it's because it's like yellow, and just the dawning of it hit. Yeah. I thought that was really well handled.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth mentioning that specifically here it is gold, they keep saying, so it's not just anything vaguely yellow. I think it has to be gold. Now, admittedly, like if you're one little shade off, like, does that still count? There's a lot of pernickety questions you could ask if you wanted to.
And I do love that John's cleaned that up in the mid-2000s. It was like, yes, it's a weakness for unexperienced Lanterns, that once you learn to overcome that power of fear, because he did the whole parallax stuff, it stuff does work on yellow, but it's still a little bit weak to it too. So I wonder if that's what we're kind of building to too. That once you have like a mastery over the slight or whatever, it won't, it won't be as easy, right? Because it's a person.
I mean, I'm not even thinking about that yet, because it's not important yet. It's not like a part of what we're doing.
No, but just with the way that the Green Lantern Corps is being served with this monstrous. Why am I drawing a blank on him?
Sir?
Abin Sur, yeah, with the monstrous version of him and whatever too. Like there's so much mystery surrounding the Green Lantern Corps, and it's like, what's up with this yellow, right?
You keep saying core. Gold. How do you know it's a core in this case?
True. It might just be him, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the context is. Like, Green Lantern Corps is something specifically from the regular universe. We have no idea if there's a core here.
True.
So yeah, I mean, this issue mostly takes place in the back part of the timeline, which is in the town. They're trapped in this this bubble of green energy. The remains of Guy Gardner are being eaten by vultures, which
Is it Guy? Or this is the motor? I thought this was the motorcyclist that hit. They're looking at it on the outside because there's no green tinge to it.
You know what? That makes a bit more sense. I just saw it before, because you see it before they start talking about it. I just assumed it was Guy and moved on with my life. I guess Guy's already been eaten.
Only because of something that happens later about the judgment. I think there's more going on there.
Sure. No, you're probably I think you're probably right. But let me joke about that dumb bitch Guy Gardner being dead. Like, you don't need to.
You're fine. I just
pernickety here.
I'm just saving you the corrections that are bound to come. All right.
There is nothing incorrect about enjoying the death of Guy Gardner. Nothing.
Also, the more I see Nathan Fillion in the Superbad stuff,
he's so dead.
The more I hate that hair. The more I hate that haircut, and the fact that they've given him that haircut and they're making a big deal about it. It's like, oh, this might not be good for Guy right now. Like, we have if Gunn needs to make a statement, Fillion's that guy, right?
He's such a goner. So yeah. Anyway, so the last issue ended with Jon Stewart picking up the ring and kind of like wondering about it, and he's explaining that, hey, there's something strange here. They also explain here that people on the outside of the bubble don't see the green bubble. They just kind of get mentally kind of like coerced into like, oh, we'll turn back. We won't drive this way. We'll just turn around. So that's what we see a van do. So they kind of speculate on that a little bit. But Jon Stewart throws the ring through the dome, and it does go through, and it's giving him an idea. So he goes to Hal Jordan, but then we cut back to the present day stuff, which is basically just that Hal can't control the Black Hand, and ultimately attacks Joe. So we get a bit of an action sequence where she like fights back, and then Hal goes flying out of this diner into like the desert outside. It's a fun.
And we get the
It's a fun it's a fun few panels, I'll say, because you get the big fist hitting the shadow of Hal, and then the wide panel of the beam of him flying away.
Yeah,
it was really good.
So because it seems like the energy that's coming off of his hand in the black hand, it seems more like it's tendrily, right? Like it's crawling around, and then when we see the big force go through it right at the top of that page, where she's like pushing, and then it makes the fist and it comes through, and it just shows like the difference in these two abilities. I think the art really, really is doing some heavy lifting here.
Yeah, and of course there's a moment where, Hal says, "How are you controlling that light?" And she's like, "I don't know how." And then he can control it. And obviously we know that, at least traditionally, the green light is controlled with willpower. Obviously that's not the answer to what Hal's got, because Hal has something else entirely. But I do like that we're kind of like having them sort of touch around this idea that Joe just has the will to control this and wield it. But it's interesting all the same, though. And I did notice that she is indeed wearing a ring where the light seems to be emanating from in one of those panels. So, well, obviously we're building up in the backstory to see how she ends up with that. But, yeah, so that's going on. And then we go back again, and John goes to Joe and says, "Hey, like, if you got your old wedding ring kicking around?" And she's kind of like weirdly like confused as why he would bring this up. It's bringing up painful memories, yada yada. But then we get the scene you were talking about where Hal gives him this stupid gold collectible, and he basically just holds it through the dome and pops it out on the other side. And it's like, hey, and because this is the scene that established this doesn't need to actually be gold. It just needs to be in the color of gold. So it's like, okay, what do we do with actual gold then? And of course he throws the ring, I think it's his grandmother's ring or something like that, and he throws it at the thing, and a hole appears. It disappears quite quickly, but a full-on hole appears in the dome, and they start talking about, hey, is it possible for us to make a hole big enough if we get everything we can that's gold in the town? Can we make a hole for someone to get out and maybe go get help? So I really dug that. Just because it's them being practical, it's them figuring out the rules. This is the sort of thing that, separate from any typical Green Lantern myth, forget Green Lantern as a concept just now. When it comes to movies with horror or science fiction, I always enjoy proactive characters who are trying to figure out the boundaries of this like weird, unique thing they've been confronted with, whether it's something supernatural or something science fiction-y. So Jon Stewart being proactive and trying to figure out the rules and have the characters starting to sort of come on board and work together is kind of exciting to me, and it makes me like the characters more. And then the fact that as soon as they're getting somewhere, immediately Abin Sur's like, hey, Jon Stewart, you're being judged, and disintegrates him. The fact that he's now done this to both John and Guy makes me think that they're probably going to end up becoming back later, right? If it was just Guy, I'd be like, he's gone, he's dead, bye-bye. But now that it's both of them, I'm like, okay, you know what? I think being judged is taking them somewhere for training or something, like, assuming there's a core. There may not be, but I don't think this is death necessarily right now.
No, because of the opening page, it's with all the black, and it's that round, almost like a ring, talking to Jon Stewart, and says that he's been not chosen. What's it say? Let me get to that front page again. My iPad is not cooperating. But it says, you must have knowledge to command the flame. You must be without fear, entirely without. And it's just John saying, I know. And so it makes me think that, there's something afoot here.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
No, sorry. What I was going to say was irrelevant. I figured out my answer before I finished the sentence.
Got you.
No, I forgot about that first page. That first page is quite interesting, which does, because I assumed this blackness though with the ring was more to do with Black Hand, just because of the color scheme, right? But now that I'm looking through all the pages with Hal, there's never any visuals like that with him. However, the one other time in the book where it does appear is when John's explaining like his theories to the other two, Hal and Joe, and he says the substance that turns base metal. He's talking about the Philosopher's Stone. He's talking about alchemy, and he says, "Hey, it's the substance that turns base metal into gold. It can also heal wounds, prolong life, creates what would you call it?
An ever-burning lamp.
No, before that, homunculus, whatever that's pronounced.
Homunculus. Right? So homunculus is like a thing that it's a human-like thing that gets life breathing, usually made of clay and stuff like that.
Okay. When he says light an ever-burning lamp, that's when you get a panel of that white circle on black. And it's almost like if there is like a voice inside like whatever the ring's power is or whatever it is, if there's something in there, it feels like it took notice of him at that point. And it almost sounds like he's talking about like, okay, he's using Philosopher's Stone because it's like a mythological thing he's heard of. But what if he's kind of describing here is the green flame? It's the Green Lantern energy.
Yeah. Because after that, he says it's a symbol of enlightenment. And it says what is base becomes gold through knowledge. Right. And then it just ties that whole thing of gold throughout the whole rest of the issue. But yeah, it almost is like whatever this ring thing is did take notice of him here. I do like though how we're getting all these characters that we associate with Green Lantern early on here, right? We got John and Joe and Hal, Guy. They mentioned Todd, and we find out that is Obsidian. I forget what his last name is, but in the regular universe, and that his dad runs the diner, right? And it's Alan. So I do like that they're using all of that type of stuff here and subverting it in certain ways. But it does feel like they're using the community to kind of shore up the Green Lantern story, which I like, and using the Green Lantern characters.
Yeah, I just think it's done a good job of building its own separate mythology, which is why I'm hesitant to even compare anything that it's doing to past Green Lantern stuff or runs or anything that was ever done with the mythology before in the regular universe, because it feels like it's building everything from scratch, beyond just the idea that there's an energy that they can tap into. Like, it just kind of feels like this is from scratch a completely new science fiction take on what Green Lantern even is. But it's using all these characters, like you say, so we're getting this kind of interesting thing where they're all interacting in these different ways. They all know each other. We don't have all of them yet, but we've got a lot of them already in this town. So excited to see where they keep going with this.
The fact that we have Todd Rice here, and he shoots at Abin Sur, and he tells him to be without fear. Now that I think about it, the stuff that's going on with Hal, it seems a lot like Obsidian's power, right? A lot of that shadow stuff. So I'm wondering if that's, we're using the Black Hand iconography, but I'm wondering if it's this, the lack of light, like this void that we traditionally associate with Obsidian. I wonder if that's what they're going for. I mean, Joe's kind of like the opposite.
They may be mixing the two, Matt, but I think you're forgetting that Hal did call it the Black Hand.
No, I know, but like for me, Black Hand's all about like the death and stuff, but that's not how this is operating. Right?
Oh, no, I get it.
Like,
it's
not
different.
even like
I'm just saying that, like, I don't think it's going to turn to just be Obsidian's thing. Like, I think maybe they're trying to connect the two together.
No. Yeah. But that's what I mean. It's like if this green is meant to be the light, then that is the absence of light, right? And that it's playing all with the other Green Lantern themes. You know what I mean? And that didn't dawn on me until right now. When, I mentioned that, Todd Rice, that's Obsidian, and he's standing in front of Alan Scott's Atom Bomb Cafe and Diner, right? So, again, it was just more of the Green Lantern stuff being,
and obviously, Todd has really little to do with the Green Lantern Corps in the regular universe, but he is the Golden Age Green Lantern's son, so there is, like, this connection to part of the mythos. So it is interesting to see them playing with that in a little bit of a different way. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's almost like, maybe, because it's interesting that Abin Sur does not take Todd, right? He says judgment is in progress, be without fear, but he doesn't take him. He just disappears. Unlike John and previously Guy, where he made them disappear. Maybe they're still alive somewhere, maybe they're not. But I think it was very easy to kind of misread what he was doing to them because of the way he took someone else's hand. But obviously he never took the guy whose hand that he cut off. He just kind of left him there. So, very curious. Excited to see where we go with all this. Obviously the fact that now John is also gone. So even though he gave them an idea that they might be able to use, there's obviously this fear that, maybe it's hopeless because immediately Abin Sur just showed up and took care of it and we're being kind of, held captive under this alien's regime. But of course the final page, the cliffhanger, is Barry, not Barry, say Hal, not Barry. I'm switching characters. Hal is painting bullets gold, which would suggest that he wants to try and kill Abin Sur. So that's a really cool cliffhanger to end this on. I feel like this issue, more than the first two, really felt like it established what the story is right now. Like, I really liked a lot of the things that the first two issues set up, but I think this one, by spending so much time just continuously on the town in the bubble where John's trying to figure things out and they establish some things, and by the end they give Hal this motivation to try and get revenge. I think it really like felt like it's got a solid like ground under its feet now compared to like what it was before, and it feels like it was already interesting. It was already kind of like, you know, it was always very curious about what they were doing with all the various elements. I think this is where it's kind of formed into, oh, I'm actually engaged in the story and I understand what the story is so far. So I think that's cool. I think this has gotten better.
And just how the light is on that last page with Hal as he's painting these bullets gold, right? How the light is, there's this green over him, and then just he's surrounded by the darkness too. Like, it's just very good visual storytelling.
I guess if I was to make a theory right now, I would say that maybe, okay, so let's say Hal kills Abin Sur, which is an interesting twist in what usually happens with Abin Sur. What if the reason why he gets taken over with the Black Hand is because Abin Sur, this entire time up front, is keeping it at bay with his powers because he can, but by killing Abin Sur, it lets that darkness out, and it goes to it goes to Hal. I keep saying Barry for some reason. It goes to Hal, and somehow Joe ends up, you know, with the Green Lantern power. Like, you know, whether or not Abin Sur chooses to give that to her, whether or not she just happens to be there by happenstance and ends up with it, you know, whatever it may be.
I mean, in the traditional origin, right? It's dying Abin Sur, but it bestows this power onto, you know, Hal Jordan. But what if Hal Jordan's causing his death and it gets bestowed to Joe? Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying, though. Even the idea that he bestows the power could be changed. Like, I'm like, we can't assume anything. Like, there's so many possibilities as to how it might play out.
Or she takes it, right? Like, she's there.
Yeah, maybe she takes it, maybe because either she gets the idea, or like I say, maybe she's just there. Like, she's the one that happens to be there, and whether because the ring just wants a new owner, or because she decides to take it. What if it's just happenstance? Or does she specifically go out of her way to grab it because she sees what happens to Hal? Or, you know, because, you know, by the time we get to that point, maybe in like 2 issues or whatever it's going to be, there's a possibility that Joe by that point will understand some of this a bit more than we do now. Like, she might have a bit more of an idea that there's two, you know, there's the light and the darkness and one's fighting the other. Maybe she'll feel that she needs to take the green power because she can recognize that this darkness, this Black Hand, is out and needs to be taken care of. That said, though, the way she talks to Hal in the present day stuff doesn't completely indicate that she knows exactly what it is necessarily, but she does seem to know that she needs to try and deal with it and like catch Hal. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. I will say though, the black, like, if Abin Sur's disintegrating of John and Guy isn't killing them, I do think that the Black Hand disintegrating the cop last issue, or in issue 1, whatever that was, I do think that was a death. I think they're gone. But
I agree.
Just a gut feeling more than anything. So there you go. That's very good. That's very good. Like, I think the sequential art's very good. I still obviously don't love necessarily the faces all the time. It's a little bit manga inspired for my my taste, but I can't fault the pacing of it and the way that it tells the story, because that side of it is very good. And I've been saying that since issue 1, so it's very consistent. So I think in terms of the characters finally kind of like putting some pieces together and solving through some of the ideas, I think this issue really like found its footing in a way that it's not even like I was missing it before, but I think now it feels like, oh, it's coming together.
It feels more coherent.
Yeah. So, no, really good stuff. I'm surprised they didn't change it to the Sorcerer's Stone for this issue, though.
No, we're trying to distance from that right now. You know.
All right, what were you rating Absolute Green Lantern?
I'm gonna go straight 8.
I think I'm going with 8.5. I'm going with 8.5 again. So I've got 2 books, 8.5. So not bad start of the week. so far for me. Batgirl, issue 8, Tate Brombal writing with Isaac Goodhart on the art. Saying that after the name Goodhart, it rhymes too much. I feel like I'm saying something silly, but it's fine. So we're doing the second part of the Book of Shiva. This was one that I was a little disappointed in last month. I think the first issue of this was a little overly wordy. I didn't think the story with Shiva was, it was all right, but I didn't really find it that compelling. Connor felt pretty similar. I do think, while I still am excited to go back to it just being Cassie's book again, I do think this is a better chapter. I think this chapter of Shiva's story was more inherently interesting than all the stuff about living in the temple and with the monks and like the uncle showing up to kill people and all that.
Yeah, I did that, but this felt like an Arrow would introduce characters, right? And you're going through the history and. There's like a WBification of Shiva's origin here. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I couldn't help. But I felt like I was back in those Arrow days where just kind of clumsy, and some of the stuff that is being handled. That said, I like where it goes because at the end of the story, I felt like the reason that we were told this is because of, what had unfolded in this issue. And like you said, I did like the last issue, I think, more than you and Connor, right? Because I like that kind of, vibe in the story. But this one, it just felt like, okay, this is why we're doing this, because the character that gets introduced through here. But yeah, it definitely was a mixed bag, I think, these last two issues. So
I just think this one flowed much better. I think I got more into like what the relationship between her and her sister was. It was a lot more easier to sort of like, the comparison to Arrow was weird to me because I think this is way better written than anything Arrow ever had.
Yeah, but like what I talk about when they introduced, what is it? The two guys.
Bronze Tiger,
Richard and Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Richard Dragon. And right there, and just putting them in their origins, and then it almost gives them to a kind of, it's in Marvel, but Heroes for Hire. They almost felt like a Luke Cage and Iron Fist type, and then you have the two others are like Misty and Colleen and stuff, and it just just the way that was all handled, it was very clumsy, I think. So, but I do like where it ends up with Bronze Tiger and Shiva, their connection because of the events that happen, right?
Yeah, I just don't think I agree that it feels clumsy to me. Maybe it's just because I don't have like a good footing of knowledge of what Shiva's origin was supposed to be before this, but
well, it's not even just that. It's just with the way that they're in, like, it's not a circus, but like the show fights, and they come through, and and then they're off doing things with the two guys, and it was just, again, it just felt weird. This is the direction that we're going with Shiva's origin. Because I don't get that from the world's greatest fighter. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what you're getting at, to be honest. I guess I just disagree.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I didn't enjoy it as much as the last one with their.
I mean, that's fine if you didn't enjoy it. I nothing about this rings weird to me. Her being a fighter with her sister, meeting these two guys, her sister being open to the idea of a relationship and wanting to let go of the vengeance and all that, whereas Shiva's like dead set, she wants her vengeance on the uncle for from their childhood. And there's some fun sequences when they fight the two guys in the ring when they first meet, and it's kind of how they hit it off because there's kind of a playfulness to it. It was a good 2-page layout. I think the art did a decent job selling me on that. I think because the two sisters are more defined in terms of character at this point, it was always clear to me which one was which. It felt like they had good, strong personalities now. Whereas in the first issue, last time, because they were kind of developing some of that stuff, it felt like they were just like two girls for a while. And it was kind of, whereas here they're a bit more defined. So it's like, okay, Shiva's the one who's kind of antisocial, doesn't want to mingle, with a couple of guys. And I think some of that is I don't know. I found it a bit more compelling and a bit more interesting. Them being a little team of heroes effectively for a bit was interesting. I certainly didn't know about that, if it was already in canon anyway.
Yeah.
So, but this idea that Shiva's still having these nightmares of like her inner like beast or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure what you would call it, but this all leading to Kane showing up, David Kane. It's got to be Kane. Like his like.
So I'm not that familiar with him, so I always pictured him differently. Him just showing out of the shadows like a super creep, and essentially having a plan that's very similar to what was that movie? Don't Breathe.
I memean, sure. I mean, you're spoiling that movie,
yeah,
because that's like revealed later on. So
my bad, guys. But I was like, okay, this is again, I'm not that familiar with David Kane, and like I can't. If I've read Batgirl, it's only 1 or 2 issues here and there, the original cast stuff. So him just showing up out of the shadows like this, I was like, okay, this is definitely weird. And yeah, he definitely gave me creep vibes, which is good. I guess that's what's intended, right?
Sure, yeah, I was fine with that. Admittedly, I don't really remember how he was portrayed back in the original cast book. I read like the first 20, so I should. It's a run that I really want to go back and read all of at some point.
Yeah.
But I think this idea here that this isn't some romance that blossoms between Shiva and Kane. In fact, by the end of this issue, she wants revenge on him. So we'll see how it gets to Caspian Born in a bit. But he basically propositions with, "Hey, I've been trying to create the perfect weapon, but it turns out the stock is important," and he touches her stomach as he says this to basically imply, "I want you to bear my child, my ultimate weapon." It's super creepy, and it says something in a scene. Not that I feared for her safety because she's Shiva and she kicked the shit out of him, but it says something that I'm watching a scene or reading a scene with Shiva, and someone does something that's so creepy that I'm like, oh god, Shiva, get out of there! Like I'm actually like feeling weirded out on her behalf.
Don't let him get close. He's too close. Yeah,
but make him put that concealed weapon away. Come on.
Yeah. I don't think he has a license for that concealed weapon.
So yeah, but the big ending though is that he basically says, "Oh, I've already went to speak to your sister." So Shiva obviously worries, runs back, and discovers that her sister's lying dead in her bed, covered in blood. And her assumption here is that Kane killed her, and I mean I don't have much reason to think otherwise at this point either. Which definitely leads to the questions of like how we end up in, because this does kind of feel like maybe we're kind of establishing what the current continuity is of like how we get to the birth of Cassandra Cain, and that's cool. It's cool to do that. I do kind of wish that I was more memorable or whatever about the original Batgirl Cassandra Cain run, just so I knew what they'd changed here. But I mean, I thought this was compelling enough. I thought it was an interesting cliffhanger. And we kind of find out that the reason why Cass is on the train at the end is because Shiva says in the diary to go see Bronze Tiger, because he can help you. So
yeah, and just the way with Bronze Tiger, he had a relationship with Shiva's sister.
Yes,
right? They were actively dating. So bringing him in on this and why he's still an ally of Shiva, like they have this bond. Over the loss of Carolyn.
Is so naive because when they're like having sex for the first time in the room, she's outside the door going, "They've been in there for an hour. What are they doing?" And like the other guy's like, let's just go and trade or something."
Yeah, Richard Dragon's a good friend, man. He is not blocking. He's helping his bro.
I mean, he makes it very clear that he's into Shiva, but Shiva just is not, like.
There's no time for relationships when you're only thinking of vengeance. All right, that might be the only thing she has in common with early Bruce. Yeah,
it's just that gave me a good chuckle. I do like the idea though that maybe like, because it's not like she really cares about these two guys up front. Like she's sort of just living like as her sister's like. I mean, Kane even says at one point, "You're your sister's shadow, and you should be unleashed," kind of thing. But I like the idea that she does see Bronze Tiger as maybe an ally is a strong word, but because her sister cared for him and like trusted him, that she inherently also thinks that he's like, if she had to pick someone as an ally, she might pick Bronze Tiger because of this relationship with her sister.
Yeah, they have that bond there, And so, and through the years now, right? And, Bronze Tiger, when he's popped up, you never feel like he's a bad guy, but he also is not a hero. He's very much in the anti-hero.
Yeah.
So you could see him working with Shiva on certain things over the years. That's not outside of the,
Yeah,
and like what happens there, because he's very bright-eyed, right, as his young self.
Oh yeah,
up until this moment.
And it's worth mentioning that when they find the sister dead, like he's like yelling, "Who, give me a name!" Like he wants revenge here. Like he's also pissed off and angry. So maybe they'll even bond as they go together to try and kill the bastard who did this. So like I think there's some compelling stuff here. And yeah, I genuinely liked this more than the last issue. I thought this was a much more focused chapter of the story. I found the last chapter way more wordy and kind of going through the tropes a little bit, whereas this I think kind of was a more enjoyable read. And I think Kane's introduction here was quite suitably, kind of like imposing and creepy and all the rest of it.
Well, once we get to the Kane part, and that's very much in the last part of the book, through there, I think it picks back up, to the more of the quality that I was enjoying in Batgirl.
Yeah.
Before, and I'm excited to get back to Cass,
Yeah, I'm not even sure how the next issue... Yeah, I'm not even sure how the next issue is going to play, because I feel like her getting out of the train means that I suspect there's going to be at least a scene or two, like a full scene in the present day stuff, if we are still doing all the diary. But at the same time, though, the cliffhanger at the end of the diary stuff does make it feel like, we have to continue that as well. So I'm curious to see what the split next issue is. It's probably still going to be more diary than present day stuff, but I suspect there may be a bit more present day, just because at the very least I expect Cass to talk to Bronze Tiger, and that'll probably at least be a couple of pages. So
yeah, because I also feel like we'll get his side of things too, from his perspective, not just Shiva's, because we were in her journal, right? So we'll get his experience of what it was like and stuff too. So, but yeah, I feel like when Bronze Tiger and Richard Dragon show up for these little appearances, I think they're a fun duo. I like that side of, it's kind of the 70s DC popping back up.
It took me so long to like, even once they started calling him Dragon, I was like, who is this asshole? Because Bronze Tiger's someone who shows up more often, and Richard Dragon's like, if Bronze Tiger is like a C or D tier character, then Richard Dragon's an E tier character.
Well, see, and I like him because of his ties to the Question, right? He's the one that trained the Question. So again, I like that side of that 70s DC, But yeah, when it said Richard Javunsky, I was like, oh, okay, that's gotta be Richard Dragon. Like that's close. So curious to see where that goes too, because I figure he'll pop back up. He's never too far from Bronze Tiger.
Yeah.
But yeah, so David Kane, super creep.
Yeah. All right, what are you giving Batgirl? That's next. What are you giving Batgirl, Matt?
I'm giving this a 7.
Yeah. I'll give it a 7 too, but I gave the last issue less. Like I gave the last issue like a 6, I think. So for me, this was a step up. I thought this was better. Admittedly, I am looking forward to being done with the journal stuff. I was hoping it was only a 2-parter because it was like a fill-in little thing before we got the regular artist full-time back. But clearly, it seems like there's going to be at least a little bit more. So, but this one's better though. So I'm a bit more hopeful now. All right, Birds of Prey, issue 22, legacy number 220. Kelly Thompson writing with Sami Basri on the art. So this is the aftermath of all the Barda stuff, and kind of spends a lot of the issue building up to the birds seeing what she's like now, under the control of this black ooze that's all around, very venom in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff early on with Canary, Sin, and Cass investigating the crater where Barda fell down from the moon and all the rest of it.
I read the last issue a bit after it came out, and so when they're in the crater and they're talking about Barda and one set of the footsteps lead and come back, but they seem different. I forgot for a hot second that Ink had came in and grabbed Barda. So I'm thinking, oh, did Barda carry out the other person, and that's why it's different? And then she shows up in the Barda's not wearing ink. Ink's using Barda's form, right? In that. So
well, no, Barda's in there. Like Ink's surrounding Barda.
Right, but Barda's not in control. But so if Barda was wearing ink, that would assume that Barda has some control. Barda has no control over what's going on.
No, but I think that's a confusing way to put it though, because I would describe it as wearing ink far more than ink is just taking Barda's form, because that makes it sound like ink's just shapeshifted into something that looks like Barda.
Right, and that's why I'm trying to get the right way to say it. But yeah, I mean,
I feel like just she's taking control and it's like a symbiote. There you go, easy done.
Yeah. No, that is. I just do, in that throughout this book, we've had all the birds fighting each other, and I just having a creative way to have Barda fight them, right, where she's not in control and she's being used here. I really appreciate that.
That's literal fighting, of course. I think it's interesting though the fear over losing a team member. It does cause Canary and Barbara to actually start to fight. Not physically, but like they start disagreeing, they start arguing, and the others even, like Sin's saying, "Hey, I've never heard them fight like this before," and Cass is like, "Hey, just let them, work it out." But they're disagreeing, like Barbara's like in a mood that they used a boom tube from the Barda's rod and stuff like that, and Canary's like, "Wait, we lost Barda, and your first concern is to be annoyed at us for something," and it feels like tensions are rising. But anyway, Barbara's like figured out how to trace some of the energy signature of the staff that Velvet Tiger, was that his name?
No, the lion guy was the one. Velvet Tiger's the lady.
Okay, sure. It's the Golden Lion or whatever his name is.
Golden Lion.
Yeah.
Yep.
God, see all these C-listers. It's tough to keep track of all the C-listers. I can't hold them all.
Yep.
So they traced it somewhere in Chinatown in Gotham, and they're like, "Hey, this might be a trap." So that'll be clear. So I love the silent panels of Cass going into the building first, looking around, and then they do the monster movie thing of having her react to something over her shoulder and be like, "Oh, we have to abort." And then next panel is just her getting thrown out the window. And of course we get the tease of just sort of the black blur coming out the window. And then you see in full glory, it's like Ink Barda, like standing there, ready to fight them. She damages the drone that Barbara was using, which shocks her as well. She gets like knocked out of her chair back at the headquarters, and and there's a moment here as well where like Barda punches Canary or tries to, and the ink stretches to reach her, and it actually lets a little bit of Barda show through. And Barda actually is able to say something. She's like, "Canary, why?" And she doesn't get to finish before ink just consumes her again. And she's back under control. So I like that because it means the birds know for sure that Barda's in there. And obviously they know it's not really her, that she's being controlled. But I love that they know that it's not just, oh, they've cloned her somehow or they've done something like that. Like they know Barda's literally caged inside this being. Like her strength is being used against them. So... fun stuff there. And then Sela shows up back at the headquarters and helps Barbara up. And Barbara gets a little suspicious because of Sela's connection to, which one's her mum again?
Tiger,
thank you. Velvet Tiger.
And that whole thing with Barbara being responsible for the death of Velvet Tiger is the whole reason that we got introduced to Sela.
Barbara.
Barbara, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Barbara, right. So I feel like we're, Thompson's bringing all this stuff back around.
It feels like we're inching towards the inevitability that might be a thing that's going to have to happen in some way. The big cliffhanger, though, is when they're talking, some beeping goes off, and Barbara's like, "Shit, we have to go now." And then the rest of the birds get out of the sewer, and they look up, and the headquarters blows up. So we get this big dramatic cliffhanger. And I really like the art in the last panel of like Canary, Cass, and Sin looking up. It does that thing that I love in the art sometimes for Cass when she's in her outfit, where you get this like the sad surprise look in her face, even without the mouth. It's just like a really smart, really. I feel like it's probably. I mean, it seems hard to pull off as an artist. Maybe it isn't, but it's impressive to me. Damn it.
That's why it's good that she has expressive eyes, right? Her eyes are always bigger than other people's, and that always, serves the purpose of her being being able to show expression under that expressionless mask.
Yeah, and of course, the good thing here is that because Canary was fighting with Barbara earlier, there's going to be this extra guilt over like, oh, did we like not get back in time, and did she just die? In fact, the final narration panel of the comic on that panel, the box says it's just Canary saying Barbara, And earlier on, like her narration was complaining about Barbara, or Barbara's being too controlling, Barbara's, being this or that. Like she was like venting in her narration about her. And then on the last panel, there's just this kind of, oh no, she might have lost her. So there'll be this sense of guilt, I think, before she finds out Barbara's still alive, which she definitely is. But, I think that's what we'll be doing, at least partially next issue.
Sela could teleport, right? That's part of her thing?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, also, how much did you love the fact that Poe took the form of the cat? Because, no one notices a stray cat running around, right? Like they do a wolf or whatever else. I immediately thought of you.
Yeah, I have to admit, I did quite enjoy those panels. Like, the POV panels of Barbara's eyes opening up and there's just a cat there staring down, looking not unlike my cat Wesker.
Yeah. I was like, oh, Pete's going to love this, And then the head rubs that Poe gets as a cat, you know. But yeah, I was like, I'm trying to remember Sela's powers, and I was like, they have something to do with teleportation. So maybe they got out of there before the bomb went off.
Yeah,
so they might not be unscathed, but the headquarters are gone.
She was definitely teleporting through the different like worlds that we're in during that arc. So yeah, I think that probably translates to teleporting here. So yeah, I mean, obviously they're definitely fine. There's no way they just killed Barbara. But I think this arc's really interesting, and I thought because they were looking for like the villain's lair in this issue, I thought they might get to the point where they realized there's like an evil oracle. Because one of the things that Barbara was talking about earlier on in the issue that was frustrating her is that like Velvet, Tiger, and Golden Lion, like they're clearly not the leaders of this group. Like they wouldn't have given themselves the sewer job if they were the leaders. So who's in charge? Who's running the show? So they've not even gotten to the point yet where they realize that there's an evil oracle, the anti-oracles, on the team.
Yeah, because it's even Copperhead, where even Canary's just like, Copperhead's not a leader either. So it's not him. He's glorified muscle.
Yeah.
So like, who's doing this? But yeah, that line of the leader doesn't give themselves the sewer job.
Yeah.
That line cracked me up.
Yeah, plus, so I think that set me up for the surprise of, like, Inked Up Barda, like, being the big threat that they find. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense, because they established this at the end of the last issue, and this is obviously conflicting for the team, because they want to try and save their team member, but the team member's a new god who is trying to fight them. So, I also like them really emphasizing the stakes there as well, before they even got to, like, what happened to Barda. This idea that whatever team we're going up against took down a new god, so are we really prepared to fight whatever this is, whatever this team is, whoever this leader is? Can we take them on? I like them selling that as a big threat throughout as well. So, no, I think this arc has been pretty solid so far.
Yeah, about Velvet Tiger, I'm looking back at the start of when we see Barbara. Talking about that Velvet Tiger had like short bursts of super speed because it was like temporal distortion. And that's not something that's typical of Velvet Tiger. Right? So there's also some temporal things going on here.
Actually, specifically she says this is a power that she used to have but hasn't for a long time. She says that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. But we haven't had, maybe it's something. So yeah, maybe it's time displacement type stuff too. Right? Like we're getting into all of that type of stuff, because Ink, as far as I know, Ink's from Batman Beyond. Yeah,
I remember you telling me that.
That's in the future. So yeah, maybe we're dealing with some timey-wimey stuff here. Someone's trying to get the jump on Barbara for
Well, it wouldn't be the first time in this run we've had someone from the future come back. We've that's been a running theme on a couple of the arcs, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And also, I didn't realize that the Mega Rod could only be held by like superpowered people. So I did some investigation there, and it's because it's too powerful, and essentially the power that comes from it can vaporize a normal human. Or it does psychological damage, something along those lines, and depending on who was writing. So the fact that they had to have Megara handle it, and there's some trust there because of their past with Megara, I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I laughed at the line where she's like, "Oh, I've been dreaming of touching this for a long time," and like one of them's like, "Oh, that does not make me feel good about you touching this."
No. Yeah. Again, so it's just some Kelly Thompson goodness in there with the dialogue and the interactions between the characters.
Oh yeah, always handles that so well. There's always just a good back and forth between the characters. Honestly, the only critique I could really have is that all the villains are so C and D tier that I'm struggling to remember them all when we go back to an issue. But other than that, everything's hunky dory.
We got Tiger Lady, you got Snake Man, you got Lion Dude. You know, not Venom. You know, like but it's. The reason I come back for this is the camaraderie between them, and it does feel like I can't remember a team book feeling like such a team in a minute. Like we had some of this when Taylor was writing Nightwing, where all of those characters felt like when he'd bring the Titans in, and that all felt like they had their camaraderie down. So it's just the sign of a good writer that as much as the timey-wimey stuff and the temporal displacements and fighting and Barda is great. It's relationships in this book that make it sing and make it one of the ones I look forward to every month. So also Barda. I do love Barda, so I take that part back. I'm always here for Barda.
Oh, that's the other touching thing is Cass being really like, we need to get Barda back. Like her caring about Barda, especially, is because their friendship, their friendship's been so touching, throughout the book. That
and she's the first one to see Barda in this form too. Yeah. So like that hits. So, but I'm liking this arc so far. I don't know where it's going in a good way.
Yeah, I think the key thing is here is that we talk about this being a team book and the camaraderie being a big thing. So having them like have legitimate reasons to get mad at each other, test those relationships. So that's engaging because we care about the team and the characters.
Yeah.
But it also feels like because Cash and Barda's friendship, also them fighting each other and Barda being impressed with Cassie's fighting skills and like wanting to train with her, that feels to me like the Thompson always knew where this was going. Like she always knew she was building up to like this arc where Barda was going to be taken over by an evil entity and it was going to pit Cass against her, because it feels like it's paying off on a lot of those things that have already been established. So really good stuff. So Matt, what are you giving Birds of Prey?
I'm gonna give it an 8.5.
Yeah, I kind of want to. I think I was going to go with the flat 8, and I think the only reason why I'm not going higher than that is just because, from maybe a structure perspective, maybe the first half, like I think the back half is like excellent. The back half is super strong. The first half, maybe it's just because like remembering what happened last issue took me like a few pages to kind of click, but the first half felt a little bit less, with a flow, I guess. Also, I do want to point out in the opening scene where they're in the desert with the crater, that they're using Power Rangers color scheme, like dress code, where Cass has got like a yellow hood because that's part of her costume colors, Sin's got a green hood, and Canary's got a blue shirt because she's got blue in her costume. That made me laugh because it is straight up like Tommy has to always wear the green t-shirt, Jason's always got to wear the red t-shirt. Some of that.
The thing that I always wondered is like, did those kids always color coordinate before they got the powers from Zordon? Or did they have to get rid of all the other clothes that they had so they could always coordinate? Yeah,
I especially like it though that Tommy turned into the White Ranger. All of a sudden, he only owned white t-shirts from that point on. That's very strange.
Well, and if you ever made it to Dino Thunder where he becomes a Black Ranger, all of his clothes are now black. So, very fun.
Oh dear. All right. That's Birds of Prey. JSA issue 8. Jeff Lemire writing with Gavin Guidry on the art. So yeah, I mean we've been pretty down on this book. Last issue, well, slightly better. I still don't think was like anything close to what Lemire can do in this book.
No, but it made me feel good. It didn't annoy me reading it. I like that issue with all the Ted stuff. And making it feel like it mattered. I mean, well,
that's my problem though. Is I don't think it did feel like it made it matter. I feel like it felt unearned, right? It didn't, it didn't land as much as it should have done. I do think this issue is a bit better. Again, like I think last issue was a bit of an improvement. This issue again feels focused. It doesn't feel like it's jumping around all over the place because it stays. Other than a little bit of a tease at the end, it's mostly just in the past doing this backstory with the JSA. Going after the Spear of Destiny, or more specifically, try to stop a team of villains from going after the Spear of Destiny. And And it's basically setting up whatever the villains are trying to do in present day, because they specifically say in this story, the villains like Sorrow or whoever, like, hey, if we don't do this now, it's going to be 80 years before the stars align again for us to do this. So basically what it turns out they're trying to do is they're trying to like unleash a bunch of Cthulhu like cosmic god monsters onto Earth. That's what they're trying to do.
They are the old ones, and that's what I'm going to call them. I'm not going to remember their names, but they are the old ones from H.P. Lovecraft mythology.
Yeah. Can I just say, so I love the designs of these, right? And I love that this is what they're trying to do, right? They've all got tentacles, they've all got like mouth, anus things with teeth, right? All that's great. Later on, though, they called them the nameless ones, but I'm like, there's a page in the book where you give them all names. They all have names. Now, I can't pronounce any of the names, to be fair, but they all have names.
And that's why, like, the unnamed one sounds like such a good trope, right? Like, these are gods so horrific that we cannot name them. But then Lemire gives us their names.
Yeah, they're all labeled. I'm going to try and pronounce them, okay? Yes. We've got Aberyssal, we've got Nihilu, we've got Ukobath, and we've got Moriah Bo, I think.
Moriah Bo. Is that an H or a K?
Oh, I think there's a D in there. There's a D. It's Morabdu.
Moriabdu.
I can't.
Moria. Yeah, I don't know. Nihilu sounds like Cthulhu's little brother, who just wants to hang around. So, yeah. What you get? JSA versus the old ones? Cool. Give them a better name than the unnamed ones, Lemire. Come on, man.
I mean, to be honest, this being what the Injustice Society or whatever the team's calling themselves these days, this being what they're trying to do, I don't hate. I actually kind of like it, but it's just it's impressive just how little I give a shit though with that entire first arc, because it was so fragmented, it was so all over the place. Like, they just, we've talked to death. I mean, I think me and Connor went on for a long time last time trying to like restructure the whole thing to make it work. So I don't want to do that again, because we'll be beating the same dead horse. But
I do like there's some aspects in here that Lemire uses. So like they make Ted the one that sees them, right?
Yes.
So when Wotan's holding up the Spear of Destiny, he gets the vision, and we see it in his eyes because his eyes are lit up on the previous page, and then that's where we get them all named. And then later, when it's Wotan talking about like them coming to Earth. Right, it's the same kind of page where we see his eyes glow, and then we see that vision. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like I like the way that they showed that.
Yes, the Wotan man.
Wotan, yes.
I know it's Wotan, but it's so close to Wotan that the Wotan man.
And not Wu-Tang. And we can't mess with him. Yep.
Yeah, I'm making a reference to the Wu-Tang Clan, and I don't know any of their songs. I could not name you a single
one. That's fine. Ain't nothing to mess with.
I don't think I can name any of the people in it either, other than Ghostface Killer, just because that's a memorable name.
Can Ghostface? You don't know about the Jizza and the RZA?
I know neither the Jizza nor the RZA.
Or ODB, Method Man, Redman, none of those guys?
ODB's a female wrestler.
Yeah, yes. Also he was Old Dirty Bastard and a member of the Wu-Tang Clan.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know who Redman is. You've seen Seed of Chucky. He was the detective.
What about that would make you think I knew who that was? Like, he's just a guy. He's just a guy in a movie.
Because he's playing himself, who's playing a detective.
That doesn't make any sense. He's not a detective.
Yes. No, because remember they're going to Jennifer Tilly. He has the role in the movie as the detective, but at that point Jennifer Tilly's already Tiffany. And there's a whole thing. So it's Redman playing an actor playing Redman.
Okay.
It's very funny, but it doesn't ring a bell clearly for you.
No.
But yes, I'm hearing like the echo of Mario yelling at you for bringing up Wu-Tang Clan.
Why are you referencing someone who none of the audience know?
Just because me and you know, and it's fine. Anyway. But yeah, they ain't nothing to mess with. And protect your neck. All right, I'll hold down the Wu-Tang references for since Pete cannot.
I trust those were all good references, but I cannot.
No, I'm just gonna yell an album name, Liquid Swords. All right, we're good.
Doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
yes.
Anyway, I mean, I don't really have that much to say really, other than just the tease of these giant Cthulhu like gods is kind of interesting. That's the main thing.
can we write Lemire and make a collective effort as Comics from the Multiverse and the fans of Comics from the Multiverse to just keep his JSA in the past? Because I love seeing the JSA mess up those Nazi superheroes. Well, they're not superheroes, Nazi villains, right? The super powered ones, early on, because they're the distraction from, the Spear of Destiny and stuff. Like, just he's really good at this part. And I did not get annoyed reading this one that was too spread out, too many characters. It was very focused, all the issues that I had in the past. I haven't had in the last two. So it makes it for a more enjoyable read.
Yeah, it's still not up to what it could be, though. Like, it's still not achieving what a Lemire JSA book seemed like it could be on paper. But, we jump 80 years ahead. Wotan's there with a Cobra lady, and she's like, hey, is it time? He's like, yeah, we got the Helmet of Fate. That'll predict when we can do all this. So we get a nice big full-page spread again, but this time it's the monsters in the sky, and there's just destruction on the ground, and the JSA are all lying about dead. So it's like, okay, this is what we're building to. Wotan's got his big MacGuffin device ready to, open the portal, the gateway. But yeah, I mean, like, I think this is a fine build-up. I like what it's teasing. The action between the JSA and the Nazi villains it was just solid enough. The Black Hawks show up at one point to help with the fighter pilots, and it's all decent enough. It read very quick. It was pleasant enough. It's definitely the best issue of this book so far. It still doesn't make me convinced that I'm going to love what it's going to do next, just because like Lemire sadly here has to earn my excitement back, and right now I just can't feel excited, even though this was better than any of the previous issues.
I'm looking at the cover for the next one. It just got Obsidian and the rest of them on there. And I'm like, oh no, we're back to jumping around. I feel like.
Oh, it may not be.
So
it depends.
It may not be, but yeah.
There is one reference to everything else that's going on, which is fine. It's where I think it's at the end of the book. It must be the present day stuff where they mention looking for Dr. Midnight because she could expose Sorrow, who's obviously pretending to be Obsidian right now. So they do make a small reference to that at the end. But yeah, and the art's decent enough for sure. Like I think the big moments are good. Admittedly, it is a little bit of a shame that it's such a. I don't mean this sound like as a big negative per se. But, Guidry is a very sort of competent house style type of artist, and I couldn't help but feel that this page, for example, with all these Cthulhu-like, old ones, that if you gave me someone who was a bit more ethereal, like someone who's a bit scratchier, someone who is like a, who am I thinking of?
I think like the artist just did for that Green Lantern Dark book that we're reading.
Yeah, that would be a great pick, or a Montos even, or someone who does like a more painted, scratchy, or like sort of bleeding style. Like I feel like something a bit more otherworldly looking would look. Even the artist on Resurrection Man, which we're going to talk about soon. Yeah, like that. That's the type of art I think would have really hit these creatures.
They're a bit too clean, even for because you got Mike Mignola who does a lot of this stuff with Hellboy. Right, but he makes it work with his style when he wants to do these big, scary looking monsters.
He tends to be very like he'll use the shadows a lot. He'll use darkness to try and make them a bit more creepy. Yeah,
right, but it's still the clean kind of styles, So yeah, I get where you're coming from on that one. Guidry's a little bit too clean for something that monstrous.
Yeah,
which is why I think the JSA stuff works really well when it's not the monsters. So, but yeah.
Yeah, all right. Obviously, the JSA stopped them in the past from unleashing this, and that's why 80 years later they're trying again. So,
the named unnamed ones.
Yes. All right, Matt. What are you giving JSA?
I'm gonna give this a 7.5.
I'll just go with a 7. I think. Yeah, I'll go with a 7. All right, Resurrection Man, Quantum Karma, issue 3, Ram V writing with Anand Radhakrishnan. I probably butchered that. Usually I try and think about it a little bit in advance, so I'd say it more confidently, but I didn't quite hit it that time.
He goes by a different name in the credits, so hold on.
Oh, does he? So you get shortened?
Yes, I think it's a non-RK in the
RK
credits page.
Okay.
I'll have to look. As you talk, I will look it up.
He probably got sick of people butchering his name, and that's why.
Which is why Ram V goes by Ram V, right? Yeah, there it is. Anand RK, and then Ram V, and then Butch Geist, rest his soul. Doing the first page.
Yes, of course, yes. So yeah, obviously this book's super like big and ethereal and like so many big ideas. This one kind of gets into the fact that Resurrection Man and Vandal Savage were maybe not literally brothers in terms of like having the same mother, but were brothers in the sense that they were both caveman together, right? They were both there, and the asteroid fell. It gave Vandal his powers, his immortality, but it also gave Resurrection Man his powers. And Vandal Savage gave Resurrection Man his first death. Is this established canon? Is this a new thing?
Because I did not know, but it also plays in with the. Did you ever read the Rucka stuff with Vandal Savage and the question, and they did the whole Mark of Cain and the Book of Evils, like the Evil Bible, the Book of Crime. They essentially made Vandal Savage out to be Cain from the story of Cain and Abel. And then it's funny that that's what they're doing here too, is that they both get these powers, and the first thing Vandal Savage does is kill his brother. Right, and then leaves him. But by doing that, it unlocked a different kind of immortality for Resurrection Man. Yeah. Right. Then from there. So I don't know if that's all actual canon. I'm looking up right now, but I was having the same thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool idea. Like, I'm cool with this being what they're establishing now. I'm just wondering if this is completely new, or if this is like a new thing that Ram V's came up with. I don't know, but I like it that they're polar opposites, but on the same side versus the Kasha Dekuro. The main villain in this, I think I said it right. How he's almost the opposite of Resurrection Man, right? And they're on opposite ends. Whereas Vandal Savage is on a different thing as him. You know what I mean? Like they're opposing forces, but closer together. Yeah, I would avoid saying they're on the same side. If anything, it's the opposite, where Savage is quite happy to help this other villain because he's a prick. Yeah,
but you know what I mean when it comes to their powers. It's not like he's the complete total opposite of Resurrection Man.
Their powers are similar in some ways and come from the same source. I get what you're saying. I just think that the phrasing there maybe...
Yeah, I get you.
Needs a bit of work. No, I like how full circle this issue feels to me, because it feels like it starts off with this Vandal Savage stuff, and then by the end it brings in the ongoing villain of the book, but you went to him quite quickly, but he is not mentioned in this issue until the last 2 or 3 pages. I spent the issue wondering, what's he up to? Because he's been kind of interesting the way they've set him up so far. And a lot of the issue spends his time with Resurrection Man when he fell, because we established that he met the granddaughter of the soldier that he went back to talk to the family of back in the day. And we sort of we go through their relationship, that they get close, that they're looking up at the stars together, and she's this fancy scientist trying to do this microverse tech, right, and building this tesseract, and she's trying to make it all work. She's working with the atom, and she's really trying to kind of establish what makes the universe and all the rest of it. She's exploring all this stuff, and it's super interesting. And basically, it's this idea that their relationship is really passionate and they're really into each other, but he has this confliction of eventually he's going to have to leave. And even she, because I was kind of surprised early on that she seems to be completely aware of who he is and what his powers are. I don't think she knows about him meeting her grandfather or anything, but she knows that he gets resurrected, she knows that he gets different powers, and she understands that eventually that means he has to leave. She kind of compares him to a star, in that he's going to vastly live her. She's been alive for long before she existed, he'll be alive long before after she exists, and they'll be trying to sort of contain him into just her life, is trying to box in a star. I thought that was a really beautiful way of wording it. And it's interesting knowing that he goes on after this to having a married life with kids, where he, because that's how the whole book started, was him growing old and resurrecting after dying of old age, which is interesting that he actually did go and have that life in some capacity, but not with her. So yeah, no, it's super fascinating, and a lot of mood, a lot of atmosphere as we go through this. And she also has some really cool realizations when she finds this old letter that her grandfather wrote for her grandmother, basically in case I die, this is the letter to give to my wife kind of thing. And it basically gives her this idea through reading it that she's been, the reason why she's not cracked this idea of how to like make the microverse work is that the universe and how you look at it, like the perspective is part of it, and like the idea of just having an absolute and how it all works doesn't work. There has to be like a perspective of how you're actually viewing the universe, and that's an important part of it. And she kind of describes it as putting a piece of herself into this Tesseract, which is interesting because when Resurrection Man leaves her, he leaves her when she finishes this work, and he does so by, he leaves her a note saying he's sorry, but he goes to the lab and steals the Tesseract and burns down all of the equipment. They even mention, I think it's the Atom says, oh, it seems like he must have killed himself in a very specific way to get electrical powers because he snuck in via electrical, cables and things like that, and then just like annihilated the place. And he kept this cube. And I actually don't know why he took it yet. I don't know if the book makes that clear, because we see him sitting with this cube at this point. And then after that, we go to the, there's a little bit more where he's talking to the old Resurrection Man, and he says, hey, just like before, you'll live out your life with the family, and you'll eventually end up with me here. It almost kind of feels like he got this cube because it's for whatever purpose him and the old Resurrection Man have at the end of time. It feels like it's like because there's a lot of like insinuations from the old Resurrection Man that he could maybe make choices differently because of the way their life works in the past, but he doesn't. It's like, hey, you almost wanted to kill Vandal Savage when you came back to life, but you didn't. And knowing what he becomes, do you regret that choice? And it seems like he's not got an answer for it. He's never thought about it and made the choice that he wanted to change it.
Yeah, the whole title of Quantum Karma makes me wonder about, the whole thing of quantum mechanics. And I'm not going to try to explain it there, but the whole thing of like these things happening on such a microscopic level, right? Because when you think about it, when he became Resurrection Man all the way at the beginning in the caveman times, and then the life that he's led since, right? All of these decisions seem like, beyond the microscopic levels, right? So is that what this is referring to? Like these little infinitesimal aspects of his life that led him to here, right? And then it has to occur in this way because it says that she died of a broken heart, right?
Yeah, soon after.
Rita Benny?
Yeah. Right.
And it was like, was it because of him leaving? Was it because of the work? Because Adam says that it set them back maybe decades, and so, yeah, it's all a lot of stuff, a lot of plates in the air here. And then, I trust in Ram V to guide us through here. But yeah, there have a lot of, what is going on?
It's always compelling. I'm always like engaged with what it's telling me. And I thought, as much as that there's some larger things that we don't quite understand yet, I feel like this issue is like, no, but this is the story of this relationship. So maybe some of the implications at the end we don't quite get yet, but we understand the story of like what he's doing in the context. And then the final few pages, which is that the villain here, which I'm going to call him Gash for short, because he's Gasha Dakuro, which is hard to say, and I don't know if I'm saying it right. So he, of course, has been consuming different people with abilities to try and like get stronger, and he's basically turned into like a sort of flesh skeleton, but he's got lots of like random like bits of metal. It's a little bit of techno horror mixed with like
brother. He runs a cannibalism cult. It might be one of the darkest things Ram V's written about thus far.
He's got like a doll like strapped to his back amongst all the other little doohickeys. Like he's just this weird.
I hate him.
Monstrosity.
I hate looking at him.
Of all these things that he's consumed. And the interesting thing here about the end is that he's found Vandal Savage, and he kind of explains to an extent. He's like, hey, I once ate someone who couldn't die. And it sort of led to this, all these abilities I have. And I've been like consuming. There's just this hunger that it's given me. Like it's given me this weird hunger that I have to keep feeding. And he basically says, like, I know I can't like threaten you because you're Vandal Savage. I know I can't do this or that. But, so I'm just going to ask you, can I eat a piece of you? He asks Vandal Savage to eat a piece of him so that he can, like, gain this new, like, I don't even want to say ability because it feels like it's fundamentally changing how he works. In the same way that Resurrections Man's flesh changed like how his body worked into this monstrosity, what happens when he then consumes the flesh of someone who is just immortal? Like, what sort of villain does that turn him into in a physical level? I don't know. The final image in this page is absolute body horror of just all the parts all splitting up and, you know, reforming or whatever's happening. But Vandal Savage just straight up cuts off his own hand and says, hey, when you finally see my stupid brother, like, you know, and you devour him whole, tell him that Vandal gave you a hand, and he lops off his own hand. So there's a bit of dark humor here at the end as he does that.
Again, Sorry Ram V is one of my favorites. Because again, it's this really disgusting scene and Vandal Savage making jokes.
Yeah, I love this ending. I love this idea of like the way we've been building this villain, because he's such because he was already a monster before he had any like weird powers, right? He was already a cannibal who was eating the prisoners. He was already disgusting, and then he became like almost the idea of cannibalism itself. He's just a hunger and a feed. That's all he is. He just consumes, and that leads him to consuming more. But the idea of like Vandal Savage adding something else into that melting pot to give him like another ability that might, you know, does it complement the ability that he already has from Resurrection Man? Does it like mutate into something completely new between the two of them? I really don't know, but I'm on the hook. I'm wanting to find out.
And just the fact that Vandal does it almost just to spite his brother.
Oh yeah.
Right at that, and it's just kind of, you know, what they're representative of both are. Vandal Savage is this undying life of this guy who's gone and done things and he's been, you know, different characters in history, right? They make Vandal Savage because he's, you know, you can't kill him and whatever. And then you have Mitch Shelley, the Resurrection Man, who's, you know, constantly sacrifices himself, you know, in these heroic acts. And of course he's going to be brought back, but, you know, it's going to be different a little bit each time. You know, so it's this one guy that's just consistently the same, and then the guy who maintains the same course but has to change a little bit every time. And it's like, what does that mean for this Gash guy? You know, those two opposing kind of things. But yeah, man, it was really gross on that last page.
Yeah, I love the body horror in this book. You've got the big ideas that Ram V brings, but you've also got this body horror stuff that's just absolutely wonderful, frankly. So super pumped for this book still. I think, you know, and it's one of those things where it's so big in its ideas that you do get a little bit more of a footing the more you read, because you're getting a little bit more, you're starting to like come into it with a bit of an idea of what it is.
We said the same about his New Gods.
Yes.
We're doing the same thing, you know, where they almost feel like companions at a certain point, you know, where they're telling a similar story through different ways, you know. But yeah, so upon some research, this is the first time that Vandal Savage and Resurrection Man have been like related or knowing each other through the back. Okay. But because of his long life, Vandal Savage in other stories is aware of Resurrection Man and like the Phantom Stranger, or these other long-lived characters, but I don't think they have any relation to one another.
Now this is a fun addition.
So I feel like this is
Yeah, this feels like you're making Resurrection Man feel like a bit more important because he's connected to Vandal Savage, which is cool. Not that he necessarily needs that, but just this idea that you're kind of solidifying him more somewhere in the DC continuity a little bit is kind of cool.
Whereas what I guess I was trying to say earlier about him and Vandal Savage is they're different sides of the same coin versus the Gash guy who's a dark version of this Resurrection Man, right? He's this ever-living, he doesn't die, he just transforms.
But what happens when he's the dark version of both combined? I mean, I don't know what happens then, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, it's really cool. I don't dread reading this, I just know it's going to be really heady, so I try to put it off when I have the mental capacity, right? But no, and it's always enjoyable. It's just one of those things that when I read it, so before and after I read it, I have to take a break and reset, just because there's so many of these big things going on.
Yeah, well, on the villain here, on Gash, I guess that's a horrible word to be honest, but like it's good for short, I guess.
Horrible name for a horrible character.
Yeah, he I think what might happen at the very least. I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to happen going forward with him, like how he's going to change physically. But one of the things that's been clear since he died and is kind of, or you know, since he's been like just this brain that's been a cannibal that people are worshipping and feeding him, is that he's came across as very weak, right? He's needed the cult. He's needed the cult to like feed him and things like that. I get the feeling that because Vandal Savage's whole thing is that he can't die, and he's kind of the stronger of the two, right? Because Resurrection Man is like, no, he'll die, but he'll come back. Whereas Vandal doesn't die at all. So I think what that might do to the villain is that it might make him strong. So he's disgusting, and he's got the hunger still, but he might be physically imposing now. He looks disgusting, but I get the impression that I could probably just like kick his head off if he came near me, you know?
Well, you feel that's why he has all that tech around him. It's almost like an exoskeleton.
Yeah, he's trying to protect himself,
Which in the second issue, which I read this week as well, when he is just the head in the jar.
Yes.
I thought that's what we were going to go with. So when we get here and he's this techno beast, this techno corpse, I was like, oh, okay, we're not doing the head in the jar thing anymore. He's transformed over time.
Yep.
And it's like, is it the more he consumes, the more form he gets? And is that saying something about karma and whatever? With Ramsey, everything's possible.
Yeah, and I also love that most of this issue is about a relationship. It's all very human. As much as there's big ideas around it, it's very human. And then you get to the last couple of pages, and it's just, here's some grotesque, inhuman stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Very reminiscent of The Thing, too, there at the very final page, where it's just like all viscera, and you can't tell where one thing ends and the other begins. Right? It's icky.
So, no, it's still fantastic. Matt, what are you giving Resurrection Man Quantum Karma?
I'm going to give this a 9.
I find it hard to dispute that, to be honest. I do think it's a 9 out of 10. So, there you go. Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong 2, issue 1. Brian Buccellato and Christian Duce on the art. So
the opposite of heady and needing a headspace to read. This is just monsters smashing into each other.
This
is my favorite thing.
Simple schlock, and I don't want it to be anything else. Though, there's a giant shock death in this issue, so that's the thing. It's 4 years after G-Day, which they say that in this book like 4 times.
So I think there's some timey-wimey going on. I think when we get the big kaiju stuff elsewhere, it's not on Earth Prime, okay, where the superheroes are. It's whatever Earth that Godzilla and Kong and that whole the legendary universe is. So to them, it's been 4 years, but for the superheroes, because we don't get any of that with our superheroes, right?
Yeah,
it's only with the kaijus. So I think the displacement for our heroes, it's only been a short time, and you know what I mean.
I mean, Matt,
does that make sense?
There's no need to speculate. It actually tells you on one of the pages.
Does it?
It goes back to the superheroes and it says Nevada Desert Earth Prime. It's telling you straight up that we're back on like Earth Prime and the other stuff wasn't.
Right, but then right. So that's why I think the 4 years after G-Day is that Earth, but it hasn't been 4 years for the heroes.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying there's no it's straight up telling you like Earth Prime and then other Earth,
Right. Okay. No, I get that. I thought you were talking about the speculation of the 4 years for the Justice League. That's what I thought we were talking speculation on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I did think it was weird, though, that it kept coming up, because usually they'll just do it the first time you go to some other location, but they did it every time they went back to that Earth. They were like 4 years after G-Day. I'm like, yeah, okay. All right. Thanks for telling me again.
Awesome.
Yeah. I didn't think we were darting around in time with this stuff, but okay. So anyway, Barry's getting married to Iris early on in the issue, and some of the heroes are just watching it on a screen because it would be too weird. Like, because Barry's not told Iris about him being the Flash yet, he can't really explain a lot of these superheroes showing up. So only the ones that he knows as Barry Allen, which is basically just Clark with Lois and Hal, are the only ones that are there. Well, other than the other speedsters, obviously, but they're all related to Iris anyway, so that doesn't need any explanation. So basically, there's a lot of discussion from the other heroes of like, when's he going to tell her? In fact, Hal even says they've got a bet that whoever like tells either Iris or Carol first about their superhero status, they get to tell the other woman as well. So if Barry does it first, he gets to tell Carol that Hal's Green Lantern, which is a really weird bet, but it amused me. So Fair enough.
No, but I like that Clark's like telling Hal, no, but I have little doubt that Barry will win the bet.
Yeah.
And Hal just goes, hurtful. I did like that.
No, yeah. Aye.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that's going on. That's all just kind of fun, like superhero stuff. But yeah. The villains though, and this is a bit more interesting, is Waller's assembled the Suicide Squad. Some of which were in the first story, and basically she's like, "Hey, we've got like an Earth defense thing now that we're working with," and we introduced this other character who, at this point, we don't know who it is. We just know it's this Colonel guy.
Yep.
And next time we see them, we see that they've got King Shark in a test tube, and they're like, it's so obvious they're going to try and make him into kaiju size.
Yeah.
But King Shark doesn't know, and they're like, "Is King Shark ready?" And he's like, "For what?" I'm like, "Oh, King Shark, you're not prepared for what's about to happen." Yeah, we get the tease that this has made Godzilla notice with his eyes at one point. And then obviously, we get full on kaiju King Shark rampaging through the city. Godzilla shows up out the water and comes to fight him. So that's like one side of the issue. The other side of the issue is the Justice League kind of tracing where like a Waller had a secret base in the desert. And the Justice League are here. They're showing up. They're trying to find out what's going on. But they're surprised to find a boom tube inside, and they're like, "Shit, we have to go find where they went. What's going on here?" And of course, that leads to Skull Island, which presumably, I mean, it could just be like Skull, because they mentioned this appeared here after the events. When everything happened with the monsters in the first story. I'm wondering though if Skull Island went back to its original universe. At the end of that story. I'm not sure if they clarified that before or not, but that's
right, because there was that Toyman had brought all that to the DC Earth, right?
Vaguely, from what I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So and just the idea too that Supergirl, right, and Kong had that thing going on, because she's the blonde lady. Kong's attracted to a blonde lady.
Because once they get there, Kara immediately recognizes where they are, and she's like, "Oh, this is Skull Island. This is where Kong lives. There's a bunch of monsters." So they have to fight off some monsters at first, and ultimately, they kind of notice, and this is why I'm thinking Skull Island's just on the other Earth still, and that the Justice League have transported there, is because the villains notice that Justice League are on Skull Island, which to me says they've transported over to the Monsterverse universe. Yeah. So, yeah, Kong shows up, and he's pretty pissed because he's territorial. They try and talk him down, like, "Hey, remember us? Remember we worked together?" And that's the last we see of them, actually. We don't get to see kind of the payoff to that, but that's kind of the cliffhanger for the Justice League side of stuff. The stuff with the villains, though, is a bit more interesting. So, first things first, the King Shark stuff wears off, and he shrinks back down. So, whatever they did didn't last forever, right? So, he becomes normal again. They also established that when he goes big, he becomes really dumb. Like, his brain isn't big enough to, like, process the body of that size, so he's just a big, dumb monster when he's that size.
And I do love they said, but for King Shark, there's not much of a difference.
That's the obvious joke to make. Yes, it's pretty good.
Be nice to him. All right? He's got a lot going on.
But let's be honest, the big thing we need to talk about here is none of this shit. Yeah. It's the fact that this Colonel character challenges Waller for like who's in charge, and Waller fights back, and then we just get a gunshot. This Colonel has pulled out a gun and shot Waller in the stomach. She is lying dead on the floor, because we're out of continuity, so we can do whatever we want. Yeah. And this guy reveals that he is Colonel Leland Lafayette Shaw III, which, for those of you who don't know, is Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell's character in the Monsterverse TV show Monarch, which is weird because he's not a villain in that show. Nope. And this is very villainous. Yes. So, hey. Yeah. Buccellato
I saw the name Shaw, and I was like, oh, okay, that's different.
Yeah, but I actually double checked to make sure it was the same guy. I thought maybe because it was the third, or maybe this is meant to be his son or something like that. Yeah. It was like a relation of him. But no, it's straight up the same character, apparently.
So I didn't realize he was the third in the show. So, seeing that, I thought the same thing. Yeah. But yeah.
At least as far as like the wiki page for the character, they think it's the same character. It's entirely possible this comic book might reveal later that it is actually like the son of the one we know from the show. or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, doesn't look like either Russell. Doesn't look like Wyatt or Kurt.
I don't know if they would be allowed to do that though, because that's like a likeness issue.
I guess so, right?
Yeah, they may not be allowed to try and make it look like the actors in that case.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it was a surprise. Like, killing Amanda Waller's a ballsy move, so fair play.
I mean, someone was gonna have to do it. That's just it. I mean, Waller's been causing a thorn in everybody's side. This guy's like, I've had enough. Also, seeing the lineup of the villains that we get to work with, if we get a kaiju cheetah, I ain't never gonna shut up about it.
Oh, you think they're all going to get kaiju versions? We get kaiju Harley,
I think
kaiju cheetah.
Maybe. I definitely feel like the more monstrous of them, I definitely think we'll get some. So King Shark wasn't obvious, but I think as they figure it out, making these kaiju versions for the Human Defense Force, whatever they're called.
I mean, obviously kaiju Croc makes sense as well, but
yes.
I like the idea of Mecha Manta, like a big mecha version of Manta.
Yeah. Like kind of like Jet Jaguar, right? But it's Manta.
Sure. I could see that.
Yeah, I think that could be cool. But yeah.
Yeah, and for the record,
remembers
just for everyone, because we referenced a character from the Monarch TV show, and people were saying, "Oh, maybe that's important or worth watching." It's not. Yeah. It's completely skippable. Nothing important happens in it. It's 10 episodes of just teasing you Godzilla. You see him for 30 seconds. It's not that good. Okay, skip it.
Look. If you like pulpy stuff and you want to watch Kurt Russell like I do, give it a watch. It's not a bad time.
After the first 3 episodes, it felt like it was just spinning its wheels. It was like trying to stretch out like 3 episodes of plot over 10. It felt super bloated.
It felt like it would have been a really cool miniseries that was like 4 episodes, and they swung it out to, was there 10?
10, yeah.
Yeah, and it swung out. But there's still a lot of fun stuff in there. There's also a lot of stuff that makes you scratch your head. But as a comic book reader, I'm not adverse to that. There's some very storytelling. But yeah, Ed Brubaker wrote on it, I believe. A couple other comic book writers.
Yeah, there was a couple of comic writers on it, which was one of the reasons why maybe we were hoping it would be better than it was. And there was like little moments here or there that were good, but overall, all the present day stuff felt like a waste of time. The flashback stuff in the 50s, it was far more interesting, but a lot of the present day stuff just felt like it was spinning its wheels. It was all just characters traveling from point A to point B with not a lot going on, and
then we get to the Hollow Earth stuff, and I thought it picked back up. Well, at least for me. But
I wouldn't be.
Anyways,
I wouldn't be surprised if we get a 3rd series of this when Supernova comes out, because that's not coming out until 2027. So that'd be enough time after this one ends to justify a 3rd, crossover. But we'll see. Yeah, this was decent fun. I think the Waller death was entertaining. I loved seeing Kaiju King Shark. It is just dumb fun. There is no depth here whatsoever.
No.
But I would be interested in seeing how this Barry and Iris stuff pays off, because it feels like there's going to be like a bit where they think he's dead or something maybe, and they have to tell Iris that Barry's gone because he's the Flash and he died in action. Yeah. Only to reveal later maybe that he didn't. Or maybe he will. I mean, hell, we just killed Amanda Waller, so why not? We killed Guy Gardner last series.
It is similar to how the first one opened, where Clark was going to ask Lois to marry him.
Yes.
So, and now we're at a wedding, and he hasn't revealed that he is the Flash. So,
it feels like that's like an intentional choice to kind of use like a superhero relationship to be like a sort of like human framing device around all the chaos that we're going to be going into.
So when Godzilla's getting ready to hit his nuclear breath, did you get excited? Because I got worried for King Shark, and then he shrinks, and Godzilla looks a bit confused, which I do like. For as much as a gigantic lizard.
Well, I kind of like that he effectively suplexed King Shark, but he did it by like biting his neck and flipping him with that rather than with his arms. I thought that was kind of epic. But it is what it is. Yeah.
He's got the jaws open. He's ready to blast him, and then he just shrinks down. And Godzilla's like, my winning move I don't get to use. He doesn't get to use his finisher.
Oh, he got blue balled. Yeah, he's like very unsatisfied, but he goes back off to the water, and there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, the art's decent. It's not great, but it's decent.
It's the same artist as the last one, right? Christian Duce.
I think so. Yeah, I think that was him.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, like again, the Resurrection Man, very heady. Justice League versus Kong versus Godzilla, not at all heady.
No,
just read the monsters smashing each other. That's all I need.
No, I'll say this: like, if you're not interested in Godzilla or Kong, there's no point in reading this, right? You have to give a shit about them too, and that's like for the crossover for the Venn diagram people who fit into both camps, which we happen to. It's a bit of fun, but
I have a perfect circle. Comic books, kaijus, we're good to go.
But there's nothing must read here. There's nothing important here. Yeah. It's just a fluffy bit of fun on the side, which is easy to read. Like it flows quick enough. It's a decent time. Do with that what you will. What are you giving Godzilla, Kong, Justice League 2 issue 1?
I'm giving it a really fun 6.5.
Matt, that's actually a very sensible score for this. I was expecting you to give it like a 9 because you're you.
Look, Kong hasn't done anything cool yet. They put a cape on Kong, for whatever stuff. It's a 10, okay? But we haven't done that yet, so we gotta manage expectations.
I can't believe I'm going higher. I'm happy to just give it a 7. I think it's just perfectly good for what it is. It's not high art by any means, but if you want the romp that it's offering, I'm intrigued by where they're going forward. But we'll see if they've got the juice, and we'll also see. And this is maybe the real interesting thing. The first series used Mecha Godzilla eventually. Lex built one. What other MonsterVerse characters could show up by the end of this one? Are we getting Ghidorah? Because I would very much enjoy such a thing.
We're not talking covers, but there is a Dan Moore cover where he got to draw Ghidorah, and I don't know if that's a teasing or Dan Moore's like, hell yeah, you get to draw Ghidorah.
I think I remember seeing that when they solicited this, actually, and I said, is this a tease that we're getting Ghidorah, or is it just a variant that means nothing? I know what I'm hoping for. Yep.
But yeah, I'm wondering, because the first one was really heavy on the MonsterVerse only kaiju, right? I don't think we got Mothra or Rodan or any of the more classic ones from Toho.
Which, to be fair, the movies were like that as well. The first Godzilla movie had none of those. It wasn't until the sequel they started using some of the other ones. So I have to believe they wouldn't even greenlight another series of this if they weren't allowed to use at least one other monster that was known. So,
well, especially the MonsterVerse versions, like with the Rodan that's like volcanic. Like I'm sure they can work that in. Through Legendary and whatnot. But yeah, I mean,
I'm pretty sure with that.
What were they called?
He always comes from a volcano, Matt. I'm not sure why you're pointing out the MonsterVerse.
Well, no, because he has like the lava wings and stuff in the MonsterVerse version, right? He's very more like earthy looking than a gigantic pterodactyl, But what were the creatures called in the first ones?
Oh, the Mutos.
I always forget. Mutos. That's right.
Yes.
The big old bug creatures.
Yeah. Anyway, what are you rating? We already did that. Never mind, let's move on.
We already did that.
Well, yeah, we're done. We're at the last part of the show, everyone. We're picking favourite stuff of the week, favourite panel/moment, favourite cover, favourite art, top 5 books. You know the drill by this point if you've been around for any length of time.
Look, I can talk about Poison Ivy really quick because I still am reading that. If you would like.
Why didn't you tell me when I did the list at the start? You could have said that.
I wasn't paying attention. Just edit this out and we won't. We'll just take it back to 1 and we'll just do that. I just can't pick Takara as my art. So that's all. I wasn't paying attention when it started.
That's why you pay attention to the list.
Okay, teacher.
All right, Matt. Poison Ivy issue whatever.
Here we go.
Because I don't know what it is.
It's issue 34.
Right, Matt will now talk about Poison Ivy.
God damn it, I just did the thing I hated in school where the guy goes, what about the homework? That said, I'm supposed to talk about Poison Ivy.
You're supposed to like the book, though. You're supposed to want to talk about it. That's how this works.
Yeah, I know, but like I got stuff to do. Yeah, so I don't know if you talked about the last issue with Connor when I wasn't here.
Probably not. I mean, I definitely didn't talk about anything, but I don't think Connor did.
Yeah. So anyways, Ivy it leaves off. There is a big dispute going on with the Green and Janet. Janet has been made sick by constant presence being around Ivy, just like all the plant toxins are starting to get involved with her. And so Janet is, does she want to still hang out with Ivy or not? And also in the last issue, Ivy gave Peter Undine, the guy with the flower face, like a bit of humanity in that he can't touch anybody because he's toxic, but he can touch Ivy because Ivy doesn't get affected by that. So, they have a bit of a cuddle so he can remember what human touch is like. And it was like this real sweet moment that shows that, Ivy still cares, about both sides here. And that issue ended with the essentially the police surrounding Marshview, and here it picks up with Ivy fighting them off, and she creates some of these Venus flytraps and hits them, but she gets shot at by a police helicopter and pulls it down. She sends Undine and Janet into the forest, where Janet now is just like, I don't know what to do with my relationship with her because I feel like she only cares when I'm useful, and when I'm not, I don't hear from her. And Undine just tells her, she's got a lot going on. It's not personal. Don't take it personal. She does care about you because she wouldn't bring you into Marshview if she didn't. And she wouldn't be trying to help you not be sick if she didn't care. But Janet doesn't really believe that. And she wanders off from Undine and ends up back in Gotham. And he ends up in Seattle through the transportation of the trees. And so Undine goes off to talk to the gardener because the whole Order of the Green Knight, because Ivy's completely outgunned. We cut back to her. The military have her down. She has her arms up, and Undine is able to come in at the last minute after pulling the ultimate persuasion. He uses some of his business tact here, is that the gardener doesn't want to help because Ivy turned her down and she's feeling a bit rejected. But all the other people that are in this order still believe in what Pam wanted to do, but just maybe not in her current, form of, she doesn't want to be the Messiah, but they're going to help her anyways because they all line up. So he appeals to some of the people that we had seen earlier, deal with her, and take, they take inspiration from Ivy. So they show back up while he's doing that, Janet goes to Gotham and gets Croc and is like, hey, Pam's in trouble. Why don't you come and help? And Croc's like, I got something going on. Can't Pam handle herself? That's what she always does. But he notices that Janet isn't right. So he's like, all right, I'm coming if this is what's going to help. So while they show back up with the forces, they're all fighting. And the one guy that Pam had interacted with that was bald, his name's Sprout, because she used the pheromones on him. He comes and saves her, and he's just completely enraptured by her. And she gets loose, starts wrecking shop, and Croc ends up getting taken by the military guys. And that's where it ends. And Croc's telling them all to stay back, but Janet's very concerned from him. But the issue was full of a lot of fun tension because of what we did with Undine going to the gardener, and her wanting to help because she believes in Pam's power, but just the ultimate rejection, the human side of her, because she still is a human. She's just great with plants. Her being spiteful and like, well, no, she made that bed, she can lie in it. But Undine using that persuasion of, hey, y'all believe in what she's doing, so she's in danger, so why don't we go help? And then coming back through the forest with all the, the mystical plant stuff. Super worried about Janet because she's looking like, again, in a zombie movie, she looks not good despite what she says. So Takara's art here is always top notch. I'm glad that, we get the breaks in these other stories so he can pop back up here. Just everything to do with Ivy's power set and even just the regular people comes out looking great. So pretty fun read. I'm gonna give this a 8 out of 10.
No, you're right. I'll just edit all that out. I'm kidding. All right, so we're actually at the final part of the show now, which is where we pick our favorite stuff of the week. So I'll start off with asking for your panel/moment of the week.
Look, small brain says, Godzilla getting King Shark down and wanting to give the nuclear breath. However, I read a lot of other more affecting things.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick that. I think there's several other books with moments that you could be picking.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Resurrection Man, full of them, right? That final panel of the grotesqueness that's going on, or Superman has the tornado mode in Absolute. I thought was pretty cool. But for me, it's gonna be the final panel of Birds of Prey as they're looking up at the explosion and just the narration box of Barbara and the shock on all their faces, even Cass. Thought that was a really strong moment.
Yeah, it's a good bet. There's a couple of good bits in Green Lantern as well. I think, even like the finding the sister and Batgirl and the flashback story, I think was quite affecting. But yeah, I think I got to go with the final page of Resurrection Man. I think it's just too up my disturbing alley to not feel much for it. Even though there was definitely other moments throughout that, Absolute Superman dropping the toddler off the building, I was convinced that would be my moment.
For clarity, Ra's al Ghul, not Superman, dropping him.
I never said who it was. I just said an Absolute Superman dropping the baby off the building.
Sorry, it came through on my side as Absolute Superman dropping the baby. So yes.
Oh no, I wasn't meant to apply. Although I like the idea of leaving it open for people to think that it maybe was Superman. It's a very different universe.
Yes.
All right. As for cover, I was having a little look while you were talking about Poison Ivy. There wasn't a ton that was sticking out to me. I actually can't decide if I like the Resurrection Man main cover. The Bueno variant, where he's in the body bag, is solid enough.
Very inspired.
The variant, the Gavin variant for Birds of Prey with Barda and Cass above her is a nice enough cover. I think though my pick is probably the main cover for Absolute Green Lantern. I think just the simple color set of basically just green, black, and white looks really good. I mean, other than Joe's face. Joe's face is the only part of that page or cover that isn't one of those three colors, and I think it looks really good. So, that's my pick. What you got?
So I talked about the Mora variant for Godzilla, Kong, Justice League. I think that's just worth talking about because it's got Rodan and Mothra and I think the Suicide Squad on there. It's the Suicide Squad. So that was a fun one. Absolute Superman has a... Who is this? My computer's being dumb. The Brandon Peterson variant. I just like the composition of the way that he's holding the cape and the sky behind him. I think it's for something that's not traditionally, feels like classic Superman, that image feels very in a different way. That was a lot of fun. Poison Ivy, of course, there's a variant that I like, and it is the Helen Mask variant. And it's just one of those, it looks like one of the kind of watercolory variants, but there's a lot going on behind it. There's a lot of flowers. It almost looks like a tapestry. So a lot of flowers and vines and stuff, and it looks real cool. But my actual variant is going to be from JSA, and it is the Jorge Corona variant. That's just got Ted on a yellow background with his fist taped up with blood coming off of him. It's just a stark image, and I like the color balance of it all. So yeah, that's my pick.
I love how, because I'm wearing a black t-shirt, you can't actually tell that my arm's extended out right now petting the cat. It just looks like my head's just floating. So I bought a backdrop a couple of weeks ago, Matt. You never noticed, but I have a new background. Yep. That's why it's just in for the black now.
Gotcha.
Except for when the sun's out and you can see the fold lines a little bit. Stupid sun. Anyway, what's your art of the week?
All right. I mean, I just reviewed Ivy, right? So I would be disingenuous, but I do want to talk about Birds of Prey, Sami Basri. I thought it was really strong. But yeah, it's Takara for Poison Ivy.
Yeah, what am I picking this week for art, actually? I think my gut instinct to say Resurrection Man for this. Although I do think Absolute Superman looked great. I think Absolute Green Lantern is pretty great, although there's elements of it that aren't quite as to my taste. I think Batgirl had solid art. Birds had solid. There's a lot of solid art this week, but I think the only standout maybe for me was an Anand RK on Resurrection Man. So I'm going to go with that. So what is your top 5 of the week?
All right, so number 1 is going to be Resurrection Man. Number 2 is going to be Birds of Prey. 3 is going to be Absolute Superman. 4, Absolute Green Lantern. And 5 is Poison Ivy.
All right, my number 1 is Resurrection Man. My number 2 is Absolute Green Lantern. My number 3 is Absolute Superman. My number 4, Birds of Prey. And then number 5, Batgirl. Yeah, I feel good about that. All right, that is what we picked this week. Let's see what's coming next week from DC Comics. Next week, we have Absolute Batman, issue 9. We have Action Comics 1087. We have Batman and Robin 22. We have Batman Dark Patterns, issue 7. There's Aquaman, issue 6. There's Green Lantern Corps, issue 5. Supergirl, issue 2. There's Robin and Batman Jason Todd, issue 1. That's the Jeff Lemire book that's kind of fallen up for that last Robin and Batman mini he did a couple of years ago. And then there's DC vs. Vampires, World War V, issue 10. And there's also Trinity, Daughter of Wonder Woman, issue 1, which is the new miniseries by the backup team from Wonder Woman, which is Tom King and Bill and Ortega. There's also Fire and Ice, When Hell Freezes Over, issue 3. And then your usual assortment of facsimiles and reprints, et al. So yeah, curious to check out that new Trinity and Robin and Batman books, and very excited to not read Aquaman. So
yes,
that's what I'm feeling.
We're
next
out.
week.
Also, Absolute Bane. I am stoked for. I have a soft spot for Bane as one of the Bat villains. So curious to see what kind of freak stuff Snyder's on for this one.
Yes, he's looking even more bulky than usual, if you can believe it. So. That is what is out next week. So that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, you can support Comics from the Multiverse via Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and help keep the show coming that way. There's a bunch of bonuses there for the other stuff that I do on YouTube and podcasts. There's various movie podcasts. Worth mentioning that next up on one of our shows is going to be Superman season on Collector's Cut, meaning we're reviewing the original Superman movies on the run-up to the new one coming out. So that may be relevant to your interest, obviously, if you're listening to this show. So that's the Collector's Cut, and that starts on June 14th, Superman season. So there'll be one a week doing a Superman movie until the new one next month or so. So go check that out if you want to give that a try. That's myself and David who talk about movies on there. But yeah, check out all the other stuff and whatnot. But any support is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep reading DC Comics, and remember to never get lost in the Speed Force.